Hello, everybody. We are 5 professors from mobile and web at Berkeley City College, and we just wanted to do kind of a retrospective on Paik Namjoon, who we've been talking about in class recently, and we all wanted to just do a deep dive and talk about him. Now, keep in mind that we are by no means biographers of Paik Namjoon. We're just mainly fans, and we really just love and enjoy his work. And during this discovery process, learned a lot more too, which has been amazing. So our goal today is just to kind of have a conversation as fans and discuss his work and his influence and things that we found to be intriguing by his practice and the time that he lived in. To start off, we thought we would discuss a little bit about his history, and both Professor Alfie and Kim are familiar with Paik Namjoon's history as a Korean-born artist, and whoever would like to take it from there would be wonderful.
All right.
I'm happy to. Yeah.
Drew? Well, the interesting thing about all this is that he was born to a father, an industrialist, who was a Japanese sympathizer when Korea was gaining its independence from the occupation of Japan. So when he went off to go to Hong Kong and then later on to go to Japan, he was basically escaping that part of the situation that he felt himself in. And I think it has a lot to do. He was always, if you think about it, then he went to Japan, and he was in Japan where he was probably discriminated against because Koreans were discriminated in Japan. So he's in his homeland. He can't deal with that there because his father's doing some stuff. So he goes off to Japan, and then he finds discrimination in Japan. And I think he just never found his place. He was always the out man looking in, not the in man looking out. He was always looking in at society, looking at people from outside, and never really looking from the center out. So that's kind of an interesting situation that he had. That kind of I think it has a little bit to do with probably his makeup and the way he kind of dealt with a lot of things. Right, Drew?
Yes, probably I have to add to that. The reason this nationalistic discrimination occurred in the 2 different countries, because at that time Japan was governing Korea. So there's always conflict between these 2 group of people. So that's what Norman Michael was just trying to explain. He was a little uncomfortable, but at the same time, probably it's very true he was uncomfortable either place. But at the same time, he understands both cultures. And because he, not only that time, Korean culture and Japanese culture were exchanging fast and vast way, but also his father was very close to Japanese, more, let's say, his wealth comes from being with good friend with them, which was conflict to some Koreans. So he grew up with that kind of background. So I think he knew both cultures very well too at the same time. So it was the positive and negative points. It was very ironic time for all Koreans of that time. And that powerful experience really gave him a great depth in the end as a visual artist.
It's interesting. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to, this is a little side step. That time, his father, let's say, in fact, started from his grandfather, but I believe his father was the richest man in Korea once. So it is another angle to his life as well. How did earn that freedom of thoughts when he expressed in arts? How could he abandon all those little things that all the artists think of daily? He just got rid of it. He just went forward. I think all that strength comes from his very powerful background, such as I just mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed like he had a tremendous amount of like confidence and almost arrogance in a good way, through his travels. And I was talking about this previously with Michael Norman about the fact that he would go to a place like Germany, and with this very strong culture, very large people, strong culture, but at the same point, he was just freely speaking what he wanted to do and freely expressing himself through his art with very kind of rebellious types of actions and things like that. As a foreigner in a foreign place, it's amazing confidence and for somebody to have, I think, for sure. And you wonder where that comes from. And then it's also really interesting how you mentioned just his financial background likely afforded some of these early experiments, I would imagine, in order to purchase the pianos or to purchase the TVs and things like that, so that he could experiment with these tools, which is really interesting.
One thing I remember when, because I've been a fan of Nanjum Paik, but one thing that I got from I didn't even know his history until I saw the documentary, and I'm not saying that's an exhaustive description, but I didn't understand. He did grow up from privilege, but part of his passing was that he lived a life of poverty in a way at the end. Like, he refused to go to the doctor. He refused to do things that, if you had kind of this stability, I think you would care for your health and care for your mental well-being to make art. And and what I understand is that there was a lot of tension with his father, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think what I wanted to say is that's kind of like that could be seen as a universal theme. Like, if we don't have good relationships with our parents, or we leave our home country, or there is some sort of tension in families, he seems like he took that energy and he wanted to express it in a different way. It could have been his anger. It could have been his just pursuit of curiosity, or it could have been him breaking ties and saying, I'm doing something new, Dad. But but I think what was really intriguing was that when I spoke to a few of my classmates, that's the first thing they brought up was his family and the history, and that they're very aware of the origin story that I think in America we're not aware of, or at least that was my understanding. But they also knew about his contributions. Like, there was also this balance between where he came from and what he contributed to the nation. So I thought that was really great as well.
Yeah, and he was very much he was very proud to be Korean also, which is another thing that kind of another one of these spokes in the wheel of this situation where it's a complex person in a complex world, and he's working it out in art one way or another. He's trying to figure things out through, like you were saying, working these things out. I mean, the sounds that came from those things, and the look of those video things shaking and doing all that incredible stuff. I mean, that was enough to, right there, you could see that there was a lot of trauma and drama and those kind of things that were going on. So, it was something that he felt. He must have felt that energy.
Yeah, it's fascinating too. I mean, just talking about being outside of two cultures or many cultures or every culture, kind of being an outsider everywhere. But then at the same time, kind of, inexplicably almost, as if picked out of the universe, kind of being able to harness that and then say things about, especially American culture later on through those pieces that are just so on point and so, beautifully succinct and direct about the state of the culture and the future of the culture, is kind of amazing. And maybe it's because of that, it takes an outsider to really confidently pick apart what makes it so unique. And something from within the culture wouldn't have been as successful at that, or not as often as is the case. Kind of giving a
No, Joshua, finish your thought. I was about to say something. Just go for it.
Well, I just drew the connection while we were talking about it, but kind of being from a family of wealth, rejecting it, living an ascetic lifestyle. I mean, isn't that sort of the whole famous story of Siddhartha and kind of rejecting all of your worldly possessions? And
I think it applies to all artists, not only him. When you claim that you are going to become an artist, your parents stunned for a moment, and then we explain, and it applies to all of us. And I think he went through that. Probably, I just wanted to have you think about a lot of your character. Part of your character develops very early age, and I just want you to think about the way he grew up. Probably gave him something special, because he grew up little different environment and gave him some strength. And I understand that up to 40 years old, the parents paid for his expenses. But I think, he or his family's business, very successful business people. So later, after 40s, I understand that I think that the parents just stopped paying for his expenses. So there's a story to it that's even more dramatic. So, those kind of supporting artists who's supporting, who understands, or part of his very powerful life story. Yeah.
Super interesting.
I was about to say, just to follow up with, the rejection of, parents or getting help. My background is my mother immigrated from Colombia to the United States, and I heard the struggles. Like, there was also guilt, like survivor's guilt and guilt of having a different life and freedom versus her parents. And I think, what I understood from the biography, but when I see in his work, there is this, I think, a rejection of the old to the new, because I think that's what really defined his work. He really wanted to challenge where he could fit, who he was talking to, why he would be in the discussion, and then also just imagining this whole new world. Like, I can really, I can see that if he's trying to remove his history and make a new one, an artist, of course, would be attracted to having the freedom to express himself in his music or through these technologies. I think that I'm not sure if anyone's really captured how he adopted these technologies so readily and like a fish in water. Like, he was really, really investigating them, like, to me, like a scientist and an engineer. I think that was also a part of he had that skill, like he could understand the technology and the mathematics behind it, so he could make some of these adjustments. Yeah,
right. And also kind of anticipating and like looking into the future of it, not even just embracing the technology like a fish to water, but seeing how it will be kind of 5 years down the line, 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years down the line, which is just kind of awe-inspiring.
Yeah, and that's what I think we do as professors and research, researchers in practice. Like, you can stay in history, you can be in the present, or you can really just visualize a future and just make it. And he was an entrepreneur too. I mean, that's one of the things that I could understand. Like, I'm thinking like someone like Steve Jobs, in a strange way, like he knew the engineers, he couldn't do it himself, so he partnered up. I think there's a little different story. I think we're talking about someone that had desire so much that he changed everything and everyone around him with his personality and his energy. Like that's something they talked about in the biography a lot. Like he had tons of energy. And when you meet people with tons of energy, it's kind of infectious. You're like, yeah, I'll do what you want. I'm gonna have fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
the countless
positive.
collaborators as well. Just always
Yeah.
collaborating with someone on something or other.
Yeah, positive collaborator. He was always very positive. What's interesting, one of the conversations that we had about him was when he was cut off and he's still living in New York and making work. And I think it references that collaborative nature of the culture, the art community at the time. And maybe Drew or Norman could talk a little bit about that. And this type of, we were talking about the art community that was there at the time. And then we were trying to look at some of the spokes of the wheels of change, of how it's not like that for artists now, where an artist back then was able to go and work for 1 week and then have 3 weeks where they could just make art, right? And the community was very different of art making than seemingly it is today.
Yeah, and that's actually, as we spoke about it before, it was a lot easier to be able to get the substance for just living. For you could have a little bit. Also, you were, as an artist, you were always kind of broke. It was like, well, I'm kind of broke. Maybe you can give me a 20 or something, just let me through. And money would just be passed around, from people. It was always, whoever had it gave it, whoever took it gave it back. I mean, it was just always kind of one of those things. And it's the way. And you work for, like, if you work for a week, you could pay for 3 or 4 weeks worth of doing art. There was, like, it was just that much. You had that much extra money. Working in a week's time would give you that much money to be able to live like that. And now that's, as we were talking before, now you can't really do that. Now if you have to be keeping and working to be able to, to sustain yourself for any amount of time. And it kind of, doing art almost takes a back seat at times, in a lot of situations. With mine pretty much that way. And I think most artists today are kind of like that. You kind of, you have to sustain yourself somehow. And then after that, your art comes after that. It's like, okay, now I can make enough money this week to work at it. So I'm good for this week. But it was not, back in the past, it was, you worked, I work construction, right? I work a week in construction, and I had, like, I could work 3 or 4 weeks on my artwork, then call up people and say, hey, I need some work. And then, friends would get us a job, and we'd all work, for a couple of weeks, and then we'd be on for 4 or 5 weeks. And that was kind of how people did it. And it was the same, more so in his time. That I'm, like, talking, my time is 10 years after him, right? So we're talking back 10, 20 years prior to me, and that was much easier back then to be able to sustain that life, which is not as much anymore,
Yeah, I think it has a huge impact on identity of the artist too, or somebody who's doing a practice, right? If you have to go and work all the time, you want to be the artist in the back of your head, in the back of your mind, but you're not actually practicing the work itself. So it's kind of this, like, bipolar identity, or this bifurcated identity that somebody's feeling, rather than somebody who's literally just only thinking about it and consumed with their practice all the time.
I wonder, Norman, if it has to do with, what I remember a few professors saying in my day were that, art wasn't so much like a career, like it was a calling. And now that we've professionalized art, like, people are getting doctorates in art. I have a doctorate in media arts, right? there is a professionalism to it. But before, it was like the structure wasn't there. Like a professor of mine, or I think I told this story to Justin and Joshua. Paul McCarthy, he basically had to be a roofer, and he had to go and roof so that he could feed his kids in the summer because he wasn't paid enough as a faculty member. And then he did his art. And if he didn't buy land when land was affordable, then he would basically be homeless. And I think that now you're right. We have to pay for health insurance. We have to pay for, rent. I mean, I think back then you could have one income and support yourself. Now you need like 2 or 3 incomes to even buy something in California. So I'm just thinking through, maybe life has changed a little bit so much that as an artist, you have too much of a burden. Like you have to be stronger. I think I didn't know that his parents supported him until he was 40, because that's interesting. I remember I supported myself, at 24. That was it. I had to do 2 or 3 jobs. And I think that there was no art if you worked 2 or 3 jobs. It's just impossible.
Right.
Yep.
Well, the professionalism, that's an interesting thing that you brought up, the professionalism that's involved. Yeah, maybe that is part of that missing section of what is now being an artist. That that you had mentioned, being a professional, getting a doctorate, and that getting my I have a master's, but getting a master's or doing all that. Now it's that whole concept. Yeah, I think maybe that's another one of those things that has caused change in the way artists view themselves and their world, in the world of art. So yeah, that's actually that's one of those things, Justin. We were talking about different. That's another. That's actually another possible reason why.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Because we were saying that it was almost like we think of with actually currently, of course, the music industry is breaking down right now with Spotify and these type of things. But as recent as, I don't know, 10 years ago, it was pretty apparent where there were also, and I'm actually quoting Norman on this, which is you had different regions that had different styles of art. So like in music, you have like the grunge in Seattle, or, the LA, rock style, and so there was more of these ecosystems and communities in the different cities that were helping to kind of support these communities that are very rare now. I think those have really been thinned out. Maybe you could talk a little bit about what that was like as well in those different communities back then.
Well, yeah, you had like a good example. You had San Francisco artists, which were a whole look in itself. You had Pete Volkus, you had Joan Brown, there's a whole bunch of people that I could bring up right now. Harry Parks. There's like a whole bunch of people that I could bring up, and these were San Francisco artists. They did, Parks, Brown, Manuel Neri. These were they were not just California artists, but they were specifically San Francisco artists. And there were artists that came out of LA, and out of even San Diego. There were artists that were coming out of San Diego, and there were artists in Chicago and New York had, we're talking about who we're talking about now. New York was kind of the zone for that. The Nanjing Pak, that was like New York was kind of like that's what was going on in New York, and all these different art movements were going on at different places basically at the same time, and the artists were maturing into their own style, and now it's kind of polarized. It's now going basically it all went to like New York and Los Angeles, and those are kind of the centers now of art, and all the other kind of things have all the other movements in different places have kind of quelled, And
I think it's funny when we brought up the degree type thing where it got professionalized. I think that's a really interesting dichotomy,
Yeah.
like especially when you compare it to music. Because I don't know about you guys, but it feels like a musician that gets a degree, it can't be like a punk. Like they wouldn't be allowed in the band. You know what I mean? And so now, you know what I mean? So it's kind of interesting that if that's actually one of those spokes of where it went, it feels like the artist back then would have even rejected that type of mentality in order to be a true artist. It's
Well,
interesting how the narrative changes.
I was about to say, the mythology of, I bring this up to a lot of my friends. If you read 7 Days in the Art World, I come from a lineage of art where I go to the conceptual school, and then from the conceptual school, then I go to the tech school, but mostly what's happening that I get is, some of the most innovative art that you've ever seen didn't come from professionalized artists. They came from people that experimented, played, they found community, they made up something that never existed. And I think what's strange with, let's say, professional art, um, we have to like be writers, historians, we have to now be like super social media people, and then we have to publish papers and do shows. I think that takes away from me art. I think if you want to be I'm just thinking, how could you have done all that work and not had more of your time? And
Yeah.
I think that the happiest I've ever been as an artist is, I think, being the poorest. Like all of my friends and I were poor in LA, and we all had to go and share meals together, and we cried together, and then we also had fun together. So I think what I understand about that time is that you go through a period where you suffer, but those people that are strong, so I mean, he must have been one of the strongest people imaginable to survive all of that adversity, and then poverty, and then just all the discrimination, I'm assuming, that came his way, and just the obstacles. I would have been frustrated. So I think that reveals he must have been a special person already. Yeah.
I mean, what a movement for him to have joined too, right? The Flux, everything that you're describing seems to be describing the Fluxus movement. You know what I mean? And that type of strength, that kind of, and so they were calling them prank artists. Some people were calling them prank art, which is interesting to kind of the narratives that were happening at the time, right? But at the same time, theoretically, they were making really strong points by the pieces of work themselves, right? Is there something you wanted to add to the prank artist? I saw you on mute.
One thing, Fluxus is another group. I mean, it's a movement that's mythologized, and I think that I would say that reflecting on the trajectory of going from a rich, wealthy family, immigrating, going to another country and seeing John Cage and going, wow, how can this guy do something that I was imagining, following him to New York, becoming his friend, and then actually at some level surpassing, in a way, his mentor, because his mentor went into conceptual art and not much technology innovation, but really just going through this idea of, chance. And, I think that's why I like understanding more of the history, because he had to have something within his personality that he could accept the chaos. Like, I don't think most people are strong enough to deal with leaky roofs. Like, he had a leaky roof that destroyed a lot of his art, and then he had to go and raise money. Like, he was constantly broke, and he had to get money to do a show. Like, that's crazy for me. So that's why I admire all that he's done. As an artist, he's someone I look up to. I think a lot of the Korean artists that I spoke to, that's why he's a hero. Like, he's a conquering hero. And he's made some seminal work that it would be hard to repeat right now.
It's funny. I'm just going to mention, you're talking about perhaps surpassing John Cage, or in some sense, the mentor. But just as you mentioned it, the whole story, I was thinking the most John Cage thing of all is to allow your leaky roof to destroy some of your artwork and just being okay with the ones that get destroyed. It's like a chance operation. It's wabi sabi, it's like the ultimate John Cage act. That's so funny.
Oh, well, if he made it into an artwork, I think that would have been awesome for sure.
Well, those guys, as much as they were working towards the future, they were really they were solidly in the here and now. Like you were mentioning, meeting John Cage, and they were there. It was as real to them as it could be, and that's maybe another thing you were talking about, his assuredness. He was there at the time, and that is the point, that it was the fuse. It was right there, and it had to be there. He had to be there, or else it would have never happened for him. So it's kind of cool. He was at the right place at the right time. Plus, he was the right person.
And that clearly John Cage's work spoke to him so strongly when he saw either his presentation in Germany, and it really dictated his direction thereafter. And clearly his pieces are homages to John Cage at times, and then once again took it much farther.
Yeah, it's funny, actually, while researching some things on the background of this, I found a piece I'd never seen before, but it might be my favorite of his at this point, a piano piece, 1993. So it's a year after John Cage passed away. And it's just an overt homage to him, but essentially it's this open piano, and he made it mechanical. So it's playing itself, and it's playing a John Cage piece. And you see the seat, but the seat's empty, obviously. 2 cameras are on the keys, and then you're seeing all these televisions showing some of John Cage's performances and the hands and everything. It's just,
that's great.
gorgeous tribute to his friend. and also technologically forward, because, the digital player piano, which is what that is, it's using a computer program, I guess another one of his collaborators and friends created to help him realize that piece. But that was not being done in 1993, to my knowledge. So just really impressive work.
It is nice.
Yeah. So one of the things that I found also interesting was how in one of his first pieces at Gallery Parnasse, in his exhibition of music, he created essentially 20 different unique sounds throughout the house of the gallery. And clearly part of the mood at the time, you had Carl Stockhausen nearby, right? You had John Cage. And it seemed to be very early on, essentially one maybe sculptural sound, one could say, as the beginnings. And then you could also talk about just focusing in on the granular nature of music and the introduction of non-instruments into essentially the canonical music creation practice, which was a big debate at that time, right? And that was a big fight that it seems Stockhausen and Fluxus really brought forward into that community.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating, related to the musical installation pieces and stuff. Not necessarily, not saying that that's a blatant copy or anything, but there had been, earlier precedents, like Poem Electronique and these different pavilions and stuff with speakers and everything. So I'm not saying he's copying, but that is actually one of the aspects of his work that I find really refreshing, is he'll sometimes just blatantly rip off other artists, but then make it his own, put his own unique Namjoon Paik spin on it. Like with the prepared piano stuff that he did, kind of copying his friend. But then, putting a unique twist on it, and then even copying himself. He does all these serials where he does TV cello, 20 times throughout the years, or 10 times or something. Or the Buddhas. Oh, the Buddha starts selling well, so he does a bunch of Buddha TVs, variations on that. I don't know. It's like fascinating example of kind of how he did his own type of serial work and approach that, and would copy and reinvent and go forward all the time.
It definitely seems though his video work is an extension of that though, right? Like when he's playing with the TVs, it's almost a granular nature that he's playing with the graphics of the TVs. So it's almost like he's taking that school into the visual realm with his work with the televisions.
That's actually what I think. I'm not sorry to jump in, Joshua, but in class when you were given the lecture, that's actually one thing that I thought. If you go back to some of his work, the music and the way that he thought composition led into him experimenting with the electronics and trying to see a connection between the sounds and the visuals. And there was a direct connection when it came to the kind of the electronic signal bending or something. Maybe you can talk about that, Joshua, because you would have more of an understanding about that.
Well, no, not too much, but yeah, it's pretty impressive kind of what he was working with. Now that I looked more into the details of the TV cello piece, for instance. So if you watch some of the playback videos of Charlotte Mormon, performing it and stuff, and you read the descriptions, you realize that it's working on multiple levels. So essentially, when she would play the notes, the music would feed back and interfere and mess up the signal. Sometimes, which was a video of her actually doing the performance. So it's as if the performance and the sound itself is messing up the video of the performance, which is being witnessed during the performance. This beautiful feedback loop that's featured in a lot of his pieces. It seems like he was, just obsessed with mirrors and feedback, kind of even more than I realized before. Which is nice. But yeah, so early audio visualization with direct sound analysis, which I mean, I'm sure it had been done, but not too often. So it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, or deconstructing the medium in the same way as they were doing with the sound, at the very least, right? Deconstructing the medium of visuals in that case, I found to be super interesting.
I'm sure we can probably find a dissertation somewhere. I can't read. When I was in Isaiah 2019, they did a whole celebration on his body of work, and they did many publications and gave papers on his influence in art and how he used technology, but also composition and music to make that happen. So I'm sure that there is a connection, but to go back to visual music and sound, like it's pretty brave of him to take a violin and drag it, because that was one of the things that really in the documentary or the piece that they played, you would need to be a certain type of human being to destroy instruments on stage, or to really not be impacted in a way that's gonna not like he wasn't reserved. Like when he was performing, he was on. And I think that's something that when you see an artist that is just built that way, that is their nature. And I think that that's what I think was extremely powerful. When you see his pieces, I can't imagine putting TVs together to see images, or to really redefine a whole museum just because he wanted to make a monument of something. Like these are, and especially his cross intercontinental work. I mean, those are huge expressions of believing in art, the power of art, and then signal, like interconnecting the entire world. That's a huge vision. Norman, or I would say Professor Kim, what do you think about his, at a certain time in world history, him going for these big expressions, you know, what would that be for an artist, or like even someone who's experimenting with electronics or research? Like, how big of a gesture is that?
Well, I think that as an artist, you would think like, I get a chance, I'm going to take it. I'm going to get a chance to do this. I'm going to just whatever I can to get that chance. I'm going to get it and I'm going to take it. And there's who knows if it's going to be good, if it's going to be successful or not, but I'm going to take that risk. I want to bigger is better, right? I mean, there's something about those huge pieces that you're talking about, the really great huge pieces that he did, right? Those great mammoth, yeah. I could just hear him say like, it's gonna be big. It's gonna be really big. I want it to really turn the entire room into the object, and that's what I'm kind of thinking. That's probably how he thought of it. I'm just this whole. It's not just going to be the piece. It's going to be the entire environment. Everything's going to be big. That's
What do you think, Drew?
Well, as I learn about him, I understand when in the middle of his new video art or performance or installation, introducing time and, getting recognized. I think he was very playful, take all the risk, or couldn't care less. That's better described. Just go for it. And he was having a lot of fun making art, and that was really great for him. But at the same time, dark side he had was Koreans were not really accepting him, nor his art. Although he was getting recognized New York, Germany, even in Japan, but not in Korea. But of course, when it's your hometown, you always go back and think about that hometown. So I'm sure that was something he was holding in his mind. And but later he became known. Like, for example, he gets international recognized awards or appreciation of events and good shows from really good museums. Once he got that, I think finally, I can see his subjects in his art later, right after those big recognitions, he finally got glimpse of South Koreans' recognition too. Not all the way, but very good one, good credit from them. And finally, he was trying to, this one I think a little bit about what Norman and Michael said, that bigger scale in a way at the time, really he wanted to tell all these people what he wants to say, not personally play with art and have fun with it, get thrill of it. That was like that was good. And now I've been asked, or as I look at it, probably I might have to do something. That's why I think earlier you mentioned, what was it, the name of it? I looked at it. Good Morning,
Mr. Orwell.
Oh, well, that one. The whole event is trying to connect globally. And at the same time, we all talk each other. Now we do, but that time he was pioneering, or sort of probably he felt it's his mission. Like, I broke into video art now. Everyone's celebrating as a sort of a leader. I better do something about this. And then, also I think the audience keeps asking and expecting something like you said, huge monumental pieces, or connect everyone Earth, or something like that. And the meaningful, I noticed that his subject matter became much warmer, more not destructive. I mean, he can break it and still make very warm art. I know he was very skillful with it, but still, instead of doing that, since he was really trying to send a warm message, more humanity based, and even and that was the result, that the community connecting globally. As I mentioned, I saw that when it was happening. Luckily, I had a chance to see it, but it was very long, and that was enough. But what they were doing is they go to each city, and there are each city globally, of course, and important people, or some are children, some are anybody, and they all say hello at the same time. That time it was a big thing, never done it before. And this is done by video artists, and it was very significant. And I think he was doing that, and his scale became grand that time. Yeah.
What was the impact of that piece within Korea? Is that one of the things that really made him
finally,
accepted?
That is a very big recognition of Namjoon Baek's art from South Korea. It was very hard for him to get good recognition. Everyone knew he was a good artist, but getting real recognition as an artist took a long time.
Some of the people's comments from Korea mentioned that at that time, media and society in Korea were not outward facing. So this was really their only window to the Western world as well, from watching like this piece. Is that the sense that you had at that time too?
Depend on who, not major vast amount of on a part of the society, but if you knew art, they knew Namjoon Baek. So art people knew Namjoon Baek. If you appreciate art, there are some artists never look into those new art. They're just very comfortable with what they have, just to match their sofa, right? Those people definitely kept a distance. Even maybe critic didn't know what to say. Maybe they had very limited room to talk about art. They had the political regime was like at one point it's military government. At one point, this and that is so much. And culture got caught between, and they couldn't really develop and accepting. Think about Charlotte Moorman, topless, playing cello. Think about that. The military regime, government reviews it, and would they really pass that to display on public PBS? I doubt it. So, there are times like that, but I think the art people appreciated him a lot, absolutely. But he was not really well known to the public.
I mean, that makes sense. A more conservative kind of culture at that time. And even in the US, they were arrested for that piece, famously. So
that's very true. And another
accepted.
thing I want to make, even in Germany, we talked about his first show in Germany. Probably you already know. To me, as an artist, I was very shocked to hear it first time when I heard his show. That was his really major show of Namjoon Baek, regardless what town. That time he had I believe Bull's Head, live bulls, but you heard about this?
Yeah, there's
also that one also taken away by police.
Yeah.
Wow.
The neighbors that was based off of a ceremony in Korea, the cut bull's head. Is that correct?
Yeah. But to me, it connects to art exhibition. To me, it's very powerful visually, let's say.
Yeah.
And as a young artist, when I first learned about it, I was very shocked. Not because anything else, but just I thought the presence of it, how powerful it could be, just for that reason. Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, I was about to say I added some links in the chat, but there are a few about his timeline, which that's the first time I looked at it. But I'm talking about his some of the work from the Namjoon Paik Moon is the Oldest TV, that was a independent film that came out.
Yeah.
And I watched that twice. I took plenty of screenshots because I've never seen some of that work before in books. And I think one of the things I really respected, well, at least when I went to art school, it wasn't that you either love the art and hate the teacher, or you know what I mean. But it's rare to love both at the same time. This is the first time that I actually heard anything about his story that made me more attached to where he's coming from as a human being. Because let's just say that I'm at an age where a lot of my friends made the decision to live the art life, and it hasn't been easy for them. And I could actually see how this human being had so much energy to overcome all that disappointment and all that pain, because that's also, I read a lot of the work ethic that was there to make this happen. And I think the fantasy of him doing a cross-continental, bridge between two worlds, two cultures, that is, I can't imagine anything bolder. Like, now we have YouTube, but YouTube doesn't go to China. So like, there's like, you have to make bridges whichever way you can now. It's not completely free and open. Yep.
Yeah, broadcasting behind the Iron Curtain at that time, which is pretty amazing. I think Justin, you had talked about kind of thinking forward and trying to imagine sort of a contemporary, not a contemporary Namjoon Paik, but if you were working with the technology of today, kind of what are the common threads that you could pull, perhaps? Easier said than done, right? It's like, how do you subvert,
or I guess what would Namjoon Paik be creating today? What mediums would he be using? Yeah Sorry to step on that. I guess that's the question. What would be, and I guess we were just kicking stuff around, but I think one of the things that we would say is, first you have to focus on scale, right? Scale and making the loudest noise you possibly could. I think that's what we keep repeating. I think somebody said, they quoted him and they described Paik as having a primitive cry in his work when he was making his work. I don't know when they said that, if that was clearly, if he's bashing violins against a table, that sounds like a primitive cry to me. But it does sound like we're repeating that over and over again, that it's like, scream it as loud as you can, get as many people as you can, and use the largest medium you possibly can. That satellite communication, when it's first available, it sounds like the biggest medium to me at that time, right? And then, so the question is for artists now, the question is what are those mediums and what are those manners? And I think scale is, that's one thing that jumps out to me. I think you're not going to be getting much of public attention unless you are at critical scale. And I do think that the tools today, though, that are coming in, that are being ushered in, they're not 100% here yet, but they're pretty darn close, provide an opportunity to create an almost infinite scale of size of things, and you wonder how that would impact an audience, for one thing, right? Or impact the medium in general. So what I'm referring to is like things like AI, using tools of AI. I would imagine, actually, both Josh and I were kind of riffing on the idea of Nam June-pak using AI, and how would he do it?
Oh, yeah.
I know, Gustavo, you mentioned his robot, which kind of is within that space that you were talking about. Like, as far as if he created an AI, I think he'd create his own AI, right? Like it would be the Nam June-pak AI version of AI, or similar to the robots that you were talking about with the DIY movement, right?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that so we've had a few artists come through MAT, but the one thing that I wanted to say with a robot is that it is still, when you talk about AI, so we had Mustafa Suleyman from his book The Coming Wave came by, and he gave a lecture to the class, and he talked about his discussion with Yuval Harari, um, about the future of AI. He talked about two things that need containment. That's what he said. The main idea is AI. So what is AI right now? He's not talking about AI now. He's basically saying that every time there's been novelty within the system, there's been a 10x increase in technology. So he basically said that when he made the first deep mind to go into looking at Mario Brothers, he talked about the idea that just imagine 1,000,000 people touching the equal sign at the same time 1 billion times. It's a petaflop. And then just imagine it 4 times, 10 times, 20 times. It exponentially grows. And then it went to AlphaGo. And then there was a novelty there. He basically said that he's thinking about in Chat GPT 7 or 8, that it'll be able to listen, to reason, to be real time, to actually take all inputs, and it'll be mirroring what you're going to, like, who you are. So it's specifically crafted to grow with you. And those are things that I could see an artist really losing themselves in the process. But at the same time, it self-replicates, and there is no safeguards, as in world governments aren't savvy to the idea of making controls. And if we're talking about contemporary technology, like quantum computing is the next step. Like, these are so uncharted that I can imagine if there's an alien civilization, like he would invent like this signal to probably detect life in another galaxy and communicate with them and have like a ping back. It's like something so incredibly mind-blowing that I think it could inspire generations of people. I think that's, to me, he has that mythological persona. Like, if I could carry a violin with me and make scrapes, like, would it be, dragging my iPhone around and like, scraping it and then having signals mess things up around me? I don't know. But I think that's kind of cool to think about, like, what would be the next level of art. Yeah.
I think there's so many interesting things about what you just said. One of the things that made me think about is, so we were just saying, like, maybe his next piece would be infinite. And I think it's interesting, and we're starting to hear this from different people, where maybe the audience changes. You're like changing the audience. So no longer is it even for humans anymore. Now the audience is for aliens instead of for humans, So it's almost like we're thinking about pieces that are so exponential in scale that even a human can't appreciate it, that it's going to be appreciated by aliens. or maybe it's the merging of the human being more alien-like is going to appreciate it. It's an interesting thing that feels like that's actually in the ether right now. You know, it's like, how do we use these tools beyond communicating to humans? And to that, I would say, I think that's where the new fluxes should come about, where we actually rebel against the aliens, and we should be still making sure we're making it for the humans. We're not making it's anti-alien work potentially. Were you gonna say something, Chuck? Oh, go ahead, Gustav.
No. I was about to say that the more that we learn about humanity and our existence, the more we don't know. Like there is, we really don't know how immaterial molecules become life. And I think that, a contemporary artist, if you could figure out that link, that understanding, then you are you would be what an artist was before we made disciplines. You would be a scientist and an artist, a philosopher, and some sort of, communicator, like a poet. Like, I think what I strive to do in all of my classes and what Joshua inspires me to do with his, I think flexibility and really listening and sharing his talent is that it gives an ability to play. And I think that if we had all the money in the world, that still doesn't help you with your imagination. So these are all imagination exercises. And like Einstein, he had to have an imagination to create the concepts of time and space-time. And I think Namjoon Paik, he had that ability to see everything as information in a way, signal. And now we're in the era of information and big data and intelligent, neural nets. Like, that's crazy and fun at the same time. I love it. How do you make music with that, Joshua? With your new AI company, can we make a AI different artist flavor? That would be cool.
I don't know. At some point, it just we'll get into making synthetic life, and then new types of music from that, I guess.
Synthetic life. Yep.
Yeah.
So you're making your pieces for the synthetic life that you're creating.
Well, we need we need organisms with different frequency hearing bands so that we can give them the music that's never existed before. Music for bats. Intelligent bats.
Yeah, it's very cool.
What do you think? What do you think, Drew? What would Namjoon Paik be creating currently in your view?
You said what I wanted to answer earlier. You asked what now? What would Namjoon Paik do? You just talked about the thoughts that I had when you questioned. So you covered a lot. But one thing I want to add is this. This is my experience. My earlier age, I saw his work first time. As I mentioned, it was not shown in regular gallery. First time I encountered his work, American Cultural Center in Seoul, Korea. That is the place that they played his videotape. Wow. The sensation was incredible. I was teenager, couldn't sleep that night. So that was really great. Like, this is advanced, and this is exactly what I've been talking about. Anyway, so it was great. Now, decades later, I became a little more mature artist, maybe older, maybe that's the better description. And I looked at his work, and what he did was he put some objects and television sets and everything, but he devotedly painted, like Jasper Johns paint, all the brush strokes shown and painted devotedly, all outside of objects and screens. To me, as I was looking at it, I go, he wants to make sure he paints. He's in studio and he paints and he's doing art. That was the impression I had in my head. It could be something else, but I think that's what people do. Like we have we go all the way to one direction, but we must come back to the where we started to become myself. And then next day I go, oh, the Coca-Cola got me. I better go that direction and just go to that direction. And oh, that felt sensational. But however, you still have to make sure that you have to feel solid ground all the time. And artists really express that a lot. So I just want to add that
I love that.
it's a time to develop higher and better, but at the same time, we gotta have something us that we shouldn't lose. And we really like to go back. That's what Namjoon Baek did. He went back to studio and painted. First time I ever seen he painted, and he was really trying to paint. You can tell.
Yeah.
He just put some pigments and work with the colors and just make it look like a painting in the galleries. So that was very powerful moment too, to observe artists did that. Such an artist did that.
I was about to say, I had a question. Was Namjoon, was he synesthetic? Did he see things and hear things, or did he hear things and see things? Because when I see his work, it looks as though that he had this language where his visuals and sounds were linked together. Do we know if that was a part of his history or what he could do as an artist? Or
I assume so.
yeah, that's, I can imagine, because there is an investigation there. Like, I need to see it so bad, and I'm gonna make it happen no matter what, because that's what I see in my mind. So it's really cool.
I think that's a very good point, looking at his art. I think because he can connect all of it at once, therefore he's a good artist.
I think his thinking was certainly holistic, though. If he wasn't, like what you're saying is still obviously true, but I think when he looked at opportunities, he looked at it in such a holistic manner. For example, when he did the piece in Gallery Parnasse, he did sculptures in the bathtub, in the toilet, right? of the like, he didn't miss like even 1 inch of the space. That's when cool. He was actually doing something. So he was really trying to think about all the different angles, which is pretty impressive dedication to what he was going to say. Were you going to say something, Professor Alfie?
No, I was following along. I totally agree with that. It's like just fill up that space. It's all like, get it all together. Interesting. I mean, the way he views things is pretty impressive. Really is.
And on top of it, he spoke several languages.
Yeah.
So he thinks in different languages as well. Yeah,
which is amazing. But they also said that he spoke in his own language. It's just
Peckish
language.
You know what's funny about
in his own. What were you gonna say?
Oh, what's funny about the synesthesia thing is I could totally believe it and everything. And there's certain artists, right, where you look at their work and it's like, like blending of the senses. I get it. I mean, I can see where this comes from, at least, but it's weird. What strikes me the most about his work is not necessarily that, but I don't know how to describe it, but it's almost like certain artists are tapped into this collective subconscious, or these archetypal images, almost like in a Jungian sense. And I see that in so much of his work. It's like you'll see these things, and after you see it, it's almost as if you've seen it before. Not directly, but it's like, oh yeah, I totally get that. And that's why they're so striking. And he does that visually, like the ladder and the Guggenheim up to heaven. And even, I guess, like my first encounter with his work was the cello TV thing. And like, just, I saw that image. I didn't even know what it was. And like, I was like, I just want to pursue that. Like, I don't care, so something about it. It's like he's tapped into a subconscious visual language type of thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, one thing I wanted to say is I think you would consider him a polymath. Like, he has so much knowledge and language, so many different understandings of art history. composition, music, performance, engineering, electronics. Like, there's a lot there. And, I think I would encourage as a former student, I would say that, and a continuing student, I'm always learning, but I'm really surprised that if you have a problem to solve, you will make different bridges conceptually. And I think that that's why I'm also impressed with his work. He had to make these bridges and these leaps of faith and these different engineering solutions to make it work. And I appreciate the art and science part, but I think it was art, science, and experimentation in engineering. Like, there was a trial and error, and that also fit with the EAT movement too. Like, Patrick McRae wrote a book on kind of the art and technology movements in America and the kind of the EAT movement with performance and technology in Rauschenberg. I didn't know Rauschenberg was such a huge, he was a part of that group, and they made these huge works and these world fairs as well. So I think that it was part of the zeitgeist. But he was definitely a luminary in the field.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, this has been great. Does anybody have any final thoughts that they wanted to add on here? I think Drew really helped us encapsulate it, actually, and lead us towards a great kind of summary of his work and who he was, for sure. Are there any other things that we might have missed at this point?
One thing that I would say is watch the movie a few times. Really, like, I took lots of screenshots and I drew a few drawings, just trying to understand like what he was looking at. Think about it like you're observing a behavior like a scientist, or going to the fields and observing butterflies or flowers, or what did he do, and how does it impact you as an artist and as a scholar and as a human being, because it touches my heart. Some of it is so profound that I'm gonna say it, so I kind of teared up in some of the movie, because I started to get that he was suffering after his stroke and he was still struggling to make art. Like, I don't know what I would do. And I think that to me shows that he's a powerful human being and he has a great spirit.
Yeah. One of his final speeches, he said to one of the things which must have been really hard for him even to say at that point and speak was just, he's trying to implore people to think differently. And I mean, clearly him and his community did that, right? The way, everybody just watched the TV, but he used the TV as an instrument, right? That one for sure. And just pretty much he exuded that. And I think that's super important, of course, for our contemporary world and people that are in it. And by the way, Gustavo, I love the way that you attend these meetings, and putting in within the meeting, we have all these resources, and what we'll try to do is we'll try to link them in the YouTube video at the timestamps that you're sending them, so people can click on it during those moments to go research more of what you're inspired to. And we'll see if we can incorporate that. I think that'd be really cool. It makes it a richer document for people to go and check out the resources.
I'm just very humbled to have an opportunity to speak about Namjoon, and really just happy to really engage with you all. I think
this has been great.
I think this is great, and hopefully we can do more of these for sure.
No, I love the week, actually, because I was just researching all week on the topic, and I was like, what a great assignment. It made my week and really filled it with awesome, like, discovery of this man and his background.
Likewise,
were you gonna say something, Josh?
No, it's been an honor to pay tribute to him and do it with all of you. It's amazing.
Yeah, likewise.
Cool. All right, thanks everybody.